I feel like of the people that we did today. I think. Well, Clockwork Orange has the amazing sort of synth rescoring of loads of famous bits of classical music by the person who invented the Moog synthesizer. They were tasked with rescoring them all. So maybe Alex would do some sort of weird experimental techno situation. For like Tyler Durden, who I'm still dressed up as, I don't know, some sort of like shit aggressive punk band. I don't know actually. I think they'd all make awful music. Do you think being a psychopath brings out the best musically in people?
I mean, sometimes, yeah, it depends.
Who's your favourite example?
I suppose Alice Cooper, but I suppose he's a character as well. But yeah.
True, yeah, true. We were at a festival in Germany recently where we always seem to get booked at this like quite heavy metal festival. It was called Rock and Ring and Rock and Park, and we played after a band called Amon Amarth, who are a Viking metal band. It was fucking amazing. They had a giant Viking ship on stage, and they're all like dressed as Vikings, obviously, and they got the whole crowd to get on the floor and like row. So there was just thousands of people rowing at them. And then we did our gig, which is obviously couldn't really be further from Viking metal if it tried. And then we were clashing with the first half of Slipknot, who were headlining. So we then went and watched Slipknot, and it was something to behold. There's something about the fact there's all these guys who are basically doing a theatrical horror film in these like terrifying masks and screaming, and there's 80,000 people moshing. They're like completely moshing the night away, and it was quite sweet. We were watching it from the side, from sort of above, looking down, and ultimately what looks really aggressive is just a bunch of grown men skipping in a circle, which is quite brilliant. Like it's, and then you think about the guys on stage, and it's got all this like the aesthetics of like death and horror movie and torture and all this stuff, but it is just a load of smoke and mirrors and masks. And there's something kind of quite innately camp about it, which sits alongside how like macho it is, and I don't know, something quite brilliant about that. I don't know how I got there from your question. Sorry, that was a massive divergence. But I think the arc of Alex's character in A Clockwork Orange is really interesting, and it talks a lot, you know, in how it speaks to kind of disaffected youth, and you know, and how society tries to invade have an effect on our lives and invade in our kind of thoughts and personal lives, and how ineffective that can be. I think that's a really interesting sort of arc for a character. I guess John Doe from Seven is absolutely terrifying. It's really interesting that he's so present in the film. Obviously, everything that happens is because of him, but he, as a character, only comes in sort of in the final act. And he's just so terrifyingly assured. And we've seen all the stuff he's done, and it's probably, out of everybody, the most horrible. I guess Tyler Durden is obviously, spoiler alert, not real. And he's the kind of embodiment of somebody's inner angst and personality. So that's kind of quite interesting way of portraying it. I guess we all, in our heads, however far from it we may be, kind of wish and hope and think that we're Brad Pitt in a way. You know, he just happens to have done it in a kind of cool Chuck Palahniuk film. But I don't know, they're all pretty good. Who else did we have? I mean, fucking Hannibal Lecter, he's terrifying. Like, managed to turn some pulses and red wine into one of the scariest phrases in cinematic history. I'm just listing them all to you. That's going to be a theme, because I think they're all great. They're all films that like I loved growing up, and yeah. That's so hard. I think Kubrick, because he's sort of, I guess, a league above everybody else, but Fincher's pretty amazing. The fact there are two Fincher films in the batch says a lot. Yeah, probably Kubrick. I mean, you can't not say him, can you? I think, obviously, it's really important to support it. I think it's amazing to think back to how not that long ago mental health just wasn't something that was spoken about at all, and it wasn't seen as important as physical health. And I think it's, we might live in these slightly strange times where it feels like some sections of society are almost like regressing in their opinions. But I think it's amazing that for a lot of issues, there hopefully still is a sense of progress. And I think with mental health, the fact that it's, talked more about, the fact that there's, charities like Mind that, and just the general conversation kind of particularly in guys, not that it just affects guys, but I guess the cliche is that blokes talk about what they're thinking and feeling less. I think the fact that that's something that's talked about loads and encouraged can only be helpful. I think, the pathologizing of problems is in some ways problematic, but I think, it can only be useful and helpful for people to talk about it and see other people talking about it, because there's nothing worse than feeling like you're suffering from something alone. And if there's examples of it in pop culture, film, music, anywhere, even on the news or like on chat shows or in reality TV, if there's examples of people who are going through things that are similar to what you're going through and you feel like you can talk about it, that can only be a positive thing. I think part of over communication in modern culture and social media and all these things, like, it has its complexities and it has its real negativities and drawbacks, but it also, if it allows people to talk and to be heard and to find people who have, things that they're suffering with, people in common who are suffering from the same things, I think that can only be an amazing thing. Are villains giving mental health a bad rep? I did a module at university. I studied English and I ended up doing a module that was about representations of autism in literature. Obviously, that's a completely separate issue, but what was interesting was looking at the time at how kind of clunky the representations of mental health were in film. And I think as society has modernised, it's become a lot more nuanced, because I guess mental health issues don't really fit into your standard Hollywood arc that requires like progress and requires a happy ending and requires a kind of tying up that's neat. That just doesn't exist. I mean, anywhere in real life, but particularly often in mental health. So I think, that's where maybe film and the power of film has slightly fallen away, because, TV and longer form mediums allow for a more in-depth, nuanced portrayal of characters. I'm massively waffling, sorry. But I think villains, do they give it a bad rep? Maybe. Batman's got Arkham Asylum. It's probably not that helpful to fill a mental health institution with loads of really cool costumed supervillains with crazy powers, because it's just not really representative. But I think that's the thing as well with representations in film. They have to be a character and they have to serve a function. And the module that we looked at, every character that was in sort of every character on the autistic spectrum who was portrayed in mainstream film or literature was a savant, because that's what's useful in a narrative structure, but that's obviously not remotely common within the community of people who are on the autistic spectrum. I think the same goes for sort of other representation of mental health. I think there are loads more, as time has moved on, there are much more nuanced and interesting portrayals. Is it damaging? I don't know. I don't have the authority or the knowledge to give you a good answer on that, sorry. I don't know, it's like for us, we always just wrote songs because that's what we wanted to do, and it was never intended to be a job, it was never intended to be the thing that took over my life like it has. And it was really fascinating with our first album, seeing it go from something that I started making in GarageBand in my bedroom to this thing that allowed us to play to on stages in front of lots of people, and then getting the reaction of people who like your music from countries you've never even been to and cities you've never even heard of, and hearing their interpretation of lyrics and what it means to them. It's such a surreal, odd thing. So yeah. Everybody's a fucking villain, aren't they? I don't know. No, that's the thing. That the problem with films is that any good representation of a villain will show no one is very few people, apart from some like pure psychopaths, are one thing or another. Like everybody does good stuff and bad stuff and selfish stuff and selfless stuff, and you know everybody has people they love and look after and people they fuck over, and that's just, isn't that just part of life? I don't know. I'm an idiot, but yeah. They're all too good. If I had the imagination to to dream up and write an amazing villain, I'd probably be a screenwriter, but I'm not. I just make shitty little 3.5 minute songs. Sorry. Oh God. No one. I guess when I was a kid, I used to really like Donnie Darko, and he's just some sort of troubled, whingy teenager. So I guess he sort of embodies everybody who's white and has brown hair, and likes to wear a skeleton suit, which is not helpful. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know who represents me at all. I'm not. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, that's the thing with Patrick Bateman. He's like, and his character and the ambiguity as to whether or not he's done those things or not. I guess that was a really interesting, quite narcissistic insight into the awfulness of a period of time in the 80s and the sort of like narcissistic city boy of the time. But yeah, he's pretty vile. I mean, they're all really fucking cool and glamorized in a way that is totally inappropriate. And the fact that we've just like dressed me up as them all day and fucking love doing it is on a level absolutely horrendous, but also really fucking cool because you can't like they're all iconic because of their awfulness. And yeah, I don't know. But then the real villains of the world are just fucking awful, and we hate them, and we wish they'd go away. So I don't know. I think there's something about the fact that these villains are so over the top. They do awful things, but they seem to do it in a really cool way. That's really problematic. But here we are.